People, the flood is imminent! Board the ark! Save yourselves!
Remember, Genisys is Skynet. When Genisys comes online, Judgment Day begins.
Genisys is Skynet. We know that all the Terminator movies are biblical names, like Salvation and Judgment Day, and this one was Genisys. And then we have Rise of the Machines, and it's about time travel and AI. There's so much more in these movies than I've shown you guys. I have never sat down and watched the one Genisys, but I saw this clip from Genisys. And of course, Genisys is the first book of the Bible, and it means the beginnings. And what did the movie say? That Skynet is Genisys. Genisys is Skynet. So what is it talking about? Well, for starters, we know that we are working with a 6,000 year time period, or 120 jubilees. This was the prophecy in Genesis chapter 6 verse 3. And the Lord said, My spirit shall not always strive with man, for that he also is flesh, yet his days shall be 120 years. This is talking about jubilees. A jubilee is 50 years. 50 times 120 is 6,000 years. That God's spirit will contend or strive with man's spirit. And this began when Adam ate the fruit.
John, help me with the light. Will these heal up?
Yes.
Good. If you can't pass for human, you're not much good to us.
How long do you live? I mean, last, whatever.
120 years with my existing power cell.
120 years with my existing power cell.
So the Terminator lasts 120 years, or it's saying that AI lasts 120 jubilees, 6,000 years. That's what the fruit and all that was about in the beginning. God says he declares the end from the beginning. That's why we're seeing the rise of the machines, artificial intelligence, because that's what happened in the beginning. And they're telling us right here, how long do you last, Terminator? AI, 120 jubilees. Yeah. Also, we know that there were 6 days of creation. And 2 Peter chapter 3 verse 8 says that a day is as 1,000 years to the Lord, and 1,000 years is as a day. So 6 days is actually 6,000 years. And there are 24 hours in the day. So 6 times 24 is 144. Do you recognize that number? The book of Revelation. But 6,000 years times 24 is 144,000. That is a confirming witness that the 6,000 years from Adam's fall is correct. So we know that there's a 6,000 year time period, and I've shown part of this before. The first 6,000 year time period we are going to start in 4004 BC. Now, how does this work? Because everybody knows that Jesus Christ was conceived in 4 BCE. So we go 4,000 years BC, come to 4004 BCE. And you go 6,000 years forward from the starting point of 4004 BC, and you come to 1996, 1997. Can you guess what happened in that year? In the 1991 film Terminator 2 Judgment Day, Skynet, an artificial intelligence AI software, becomes self-aware on August 29, 1997. And this was the year that the world was supposed to end in the movie, but it doesn't. But why didn't it end in 1997 from the 6,000 year count from 4004 BCE? Because we have to start it from when Adam fell, not from when God said, "Let there be light." And as I've talked about before, how do we know when Adam fell? Well, to know what happened with the first Adam, we need to look at the second Adam, or the last Adam, which is Jesus Christ. And he started his ministry at about 30 years old. And Judas sold him out for 30 pieces of silver. So if we start the 6,000 year count at Adam 30 years in, so 4004 BCE, tack on 30 years, you come to 3974 BCE, which means before Common Era, not before Christ. And wouldn't you know, number 3974 in the Strong's Concordance is light. But it means natural or artificial light. The fruit, he ate it and received the artificial light or artificial intelligence. Here it is, number 3974. The word in Hebrew is mayor, and it means light or luminary. The Hebrew word mayor refers to a source of light or a luminary. It is used in the context of both natural and artificial sources of light, such as the sun, moon, and lamps. In the biblical narrative, mayor often signifies the physical light that governs the day and night, as well as the divine light that symbolizes God's presence and guidance. Natural and artificial light, and that just happens to land on 3974, which is 30 years past 4004 BCE, when God said, "Let there be the natural light, the divine light." But Adam received the artificial light 30 years later. And what does Sarah Connor say when she's working with the Terminator, or the AI, the artificial light?
John, help me with the light. John, help me with the light.
And so when you start the 6,000 year count from 3974 BC, you come directly to 2026, which is the first year of the last 42 months until 2029, when Jesus Christ comes back. And you know the amazing thing about 2029 in the movie The Terminator? In the Terminator franchise, John Connor fights Skynet in the year 2029, the last Shemitah year that Jesus Christ comes back. The original timeline. In 2029, John Connor leads the human resistance to victory over Skynet and the war against the machines. Oh yeah.
The delusional architecture is fairly unique. She believes that a machine called a Terminator, which looks human of course, was sent back through time to kill her.
That's original.
And also that the father of her child was a soldier sent back to protect her.
No.
He was from the future too. The year 2029, if I remember correctly.
The year 2029, if I remember correctly.
And where did Joshua, which means Yeshua, Jesus, fight the other tribes at? AI. And that last 3.5 years from 2026 to 2029 is accounted for when Adam fell at 3974. You go 3.5 years, and then God comes down, kicks him out of the garden for 3 days, and then clothes him with skins. Like at the very last 42 months. There's 3.5 years, and then they kill the prophets, and they're dead for 3 days, and then God raises them up from the dead. It's all a mirror, and it's all in the Terminator. And that's where the number 33 is used in the beginning. Adam falls at 30. He is in the garden for 3.5 years. And he has this artificial light. But then God has to come down and kick him out of the garden for 3 days. And then he clothes him with skins. Again, just like the end of it. God declares the end from the beginning. 3.5 years, there will be this great tribulation. And then the prophets are killed for 3 days. And then God raises them up from the dead. Just like Jesus. He goes for 3.5 years with his ministry. They kill him only in the flesh. And he dies in the flesh for 3 days. And then God raises him up. It's all the same patterns. Ecclesiastes 1:9, Ecclesiastes 3:15, and Isaiah 46:10. And for those of you who think that the covenant is confirmed by the Antichrist, you need to read Galatians 3:17. And this I say, that the covenant that was confirmed before of God in Christ, the law, which was 430 years after, cannot disannul, that it should make the promise of none effect. Everybody talks about some covenant that the Antichrist or whoever is going to confirm. Well, all of that, I believe, was about Christ and the covenant with God. That's why Jesus Christ's ministry was 3.5 years. That's why there is only 42 months left in the book of Revelation and in the book of Daniel. Revelation chapter 12, verses 5 and 6. And she brought forth a man-child who was to rule all nations with a rod of iron. And her child was caught up unto God and to his throne. And the woman fled into the wilderness, where she hath a place prepared of God, that they should feed her there 1,260 days, or 42 months. So the man-child is caught up before the last 42 months. But who is the man-child? Well, it says here that he is the one to rule all nations with a rod of iron. Revelation chapter 2, verses 26 and 27. And he that overcometh and keepeth my works unto the end, to him will I give power over the nations, and he shall rule them with a rod of iron. As the vessels of a potter shall they be broken to shivers, even as I received of my Father. So the overcomers are the man-child who rules over the nations with the rod of iron, just like Revelation chapter 12, verse 5 says. The man-child who rules over the nations with the rod of iron, the overcomers. The last days pattern is also found in the Strong's Concordance. As I've said, the concordance is very prophetic. So you start on the top, which is the year 5782 for 2022. That is the Hebrew year. And it says, through the idea of opening the eyes to waken, wake up, lift up self. This is the pattern from the Garden of Eden in the last days. That is what God has done here. Remember, their eyes were opened, the awakening, and then it says 5783 for year 2023 to be made naked. Right after their eyes were open, they knew that they were naked. 5784 for 2024 is chaff, because what happens to the wheat, that it's peeled back, the chaff is peeled off of it. In other words, the idea of being made naked. And then 5785 for the year 2025 is hide, leather, or skins. And what is that? That is when God clothed them, after all this, with skins, symbolic of light. Jesus, the Word, What is that? That is us being clothed with light in the year 5785, which is 2025. Now watch what happens 5786, 5787, and 5788 for the year 2026, 27, and 28. All 3 years for the 3 years of darkness, not 3 days of darkness now. The first one is to blind. The second one, 2027, is blind or blind men. And 2028, 5788, is blindness. 3 years of blindness or darkness instead of 3 days of darkness. And then 5789 for 2029 is a symbol self. This is God declaring the end from the beginning. This is the Garden of Eden pattern.
There is no fate but what we make for ourselves. I wish I could believe that. All my life, my mother told me the storm was coming. Judgment Day. 3 billion lives would vanish in an instant.